This is an examination of the hero's journey or quest that is found in most heroic tales. How it fits not just the stories of the past, but also how it still fits the modern journey of the modern hero, and also how aspects of the journey have changed slightly with our more modern views of what a hero actually is. More specifically, I'll be comparing and analyzing the monomyth pattern in the Epic of Gilgamesh, an example of ancient literature, and The We Free Men by Terry Pratchett, which is a modern story. As Gwyn has told the class, Gilgamesh has sort of set the standard for all the heroes that follow him. Joseph Campbell was a teacher of mythology at Sarah Lawrence College in New York for about 38 years. He looked at the heroic tales and created the monomyth as a model for comparison of these stories. The hero's journey has kept the same basic roadmap, so to speak, but some of the more specific details and archetypes have evolved over time. This is a good depiction of the monomyth taken from Berkeley. The model works counterclockwise, going through each phase of the journey, from birth to call to adventure, helpers and amulets, crossing the threshold, tests, helpers, climax and final battle, the flight, the return, and the elixir. The birth of the hero consists of the circumstances which create the hero. Sometimes the hero is raised to be such, and sometimes we have an unlikely hero. Gilgamesh was born 2/3 god and 1/3 human, so he was a pretty obvious choice for a hero. He begins as a young tyrant who takes whatever he wants with no regards to others. He's supposed to be the perfect form of man, aside from his flaw of being a complete brute. Tiffany Aching, the hero in The We Free Men, is an aspiring witch. However, she was born and raised on chalk, which is supposedly bad for growing witches, so it seems that she would be an unlikely hero. But later it's discovered that underneath the chalk, the hills are made of flint, which is perfect for growing witches. So at first she seems unlikely, but later it turns out that her heroism wasn't that unlikely at all. The hero archetype used to be limited to big, strong, good-looking men. Now heroes come in any shape, size, and gender. In our ancient story, we have a brute who is supposed to be the perfect man, but in the We Free Men, our modern story, the hero is a little girl, about 12 years old. Our values as a society have changed, and we no longer feel the need to look up to only the physically strong, but to others who exhibit traits that we have come to value. The call to adventure is whatever drags the hero, who's often reluctant to do so, out of his home towards his journey. For Gilgamesh, this took the form of some dreams he had. He was reluctant at first because of his fear of the future and the fear of what the dreams told him, but he ended up going on his journey. For Tiffany Aching, the call was her brother being kidnapped by an evil queen. She's reluctant at first because she isn't a huge fan of her brother, but she knows it's the right thing to do, and she loves adventure. The reluctant hero is actually still really popular today. The underdog is popular as well, which goes back to my point that our views on heroes have changed. We've grown to believe that even the weakest can reach the same accomplishments of the past heroes. Most of the time, heroes are given help, either in the form of friends or sidekicks, or as an object, sometimes magical. Gilgamesh had his best friend Enkidu as a helper, as well as winds that were sent to him to help him on his journey by the sun god. Tiffany Aching wins the help of the Knack McFeagle, some little blue men who also do not like the queen and are always up for a good brawl. This is yet another show of how size and shape has changed. Enkidu, Gilgamesh's helper, is meant to be the equivalent of Gilgamesh. He's big, strong, beautiful, and perfect. Tiffany's helpers, though, are tiny men, but they have big hearts and lots of fight in them. In the ancient myths, they probably wouldn't be seen as anyone who could really help on a hero's quest. Crossing the threshold is when the hero actually steps out into the world or into a different mythical world, marking the beginning of the journey. Gilgamesh begins his journey by leaving Uruk with Enkidu and heading for the cedar forest. Tiffany enters a door that takes her into the Queen's world of dreams. The hero usually faces a lot of different tests, usually proving his ability and ultimately making him the hero. Gilgamesh faces his fear of death in the future, which seems to be a real trial for him, and defeats a number of beasts and overcomes the death of his friend Enkidu. Most of Tiffany's tests are battles with drones, which are spider-like creatures that trap people in dreams, deterring her from her goal. These aren't necessarily her killing the drones or anything like that. It's mostly her being clever and figuring her way out of their traps. So tests are no longer limited to violent battles and slaying of monsters. A lot of the time, heroes simply have to conquer their own weaknesses. There isn't as much stress on the show of physical strength anymore. Sometimes the hero meets a new helper on this side of the threshold, already into their journey. Gilgamesh mostly keeps his company of Enkidu and the wind. He isn't all that great at making friends. Tiffany also keeps her help from the Knack McFeagle, but also meets a little boy who got stuck in the Queen's world who ends up helping her. Once again, Tiffany's new helper is small and young. He isn't a big, strong man or a wise old god, just a normal little kid. The climax, which I'm sure you know, is the part of the story that keeps you on the edge of your seat. It usually sparks the resolution of the story. Gilgamesh travels to Utnapishti in search of immortality. He doesn't exactly battle like he does in most of the story. The nail-biter here is that he obtains a plant that can restore youth, but he loses it. So he almost had that immortality that he was looking for. Not complete immortality, but a part of it. Tiffany faces her queen one last time, but her battle is mostly a heated argument. But she wins and she defeats the queen and gets her brother back. So Gilgamesh didn't get the immortality that he set out to get. In modern times, it isn't very often that the hero does not accomplish what he sets out to. Gilgamesh did leave with a lesson learned, though, which is something that is still prevalent in our newer heroic tales. The flight is when the hero goes back across the threshold. This part is usually subtle and just transition to the return, but can be exciting, especially when the hero is being chased or something similar and has to be across the threshold quickly. Gilgamesh simply leaves Utnapishti. Tiffany, interestingly enough, had her final battle with the queen when she was already back through the threshold, and the queen was on her side of the door. But her flight also includes a discussion with some witches. The flight in both of these are both typical. There isn't a huge deal made out of them. Tiffany's flight is just a little exciting because it included the fight with the queen. But new trials during the threshold sometimes happen in both new and old tales. In the return, the hero finally gets to go back to his everyday life in his own world. Gilgamesh returns to Uruk, and Tiffany is taken home by her father. The elixir can be many different things, sometimes something that the hero takes home from the journey. Gilgamesh returned to Uruk with newfound wisdom. He's wiser, accepting of his fate, he's better to his people. Tiffany returns with her brother, of course, but also has new witchy knowledge to use in her everyday life, new friends, and the promise of becoming a witch. These both show that wisdom, knowledge, and change in character have always been popular elixirs, and it makes sense. People have been searching for knowledge since the beginning of time. Without that search, we probably wouldn't have the Epic of Gilgamesh at all, not to mention all of the other myths. One of the biggest changes that I've seen in the hero's journey stems from a big change in societal views in general. The female hero, or the heroine, is a newer addition to the journey. It's been argued that female heroes should have their own monomyth created, but I think that Campbell's fits the heroine just as well as it does the hero. In my examples, the hero from ages ago is a full-grown man, but the newer hero is a young female. It's something newer. Furthering the evidence that female heroes are more prevalent today than they were in the past, Peter Dyer says that the earliest versions of Gilgamesh include a young girl named Siduri who gave Gilgamesh advice. However, most of her part in the story was transferred over to Utnapishtim. He speculates that this is because Siduri was a young female who was just a humble winemaker. On the other hand, Utnapishtim was an old, wise male immortal. Feminism has risen, and with it, the female hero.